That's backwards, isn't it? How does that work? Okay, I don't know if it'll appear backwards, but on my screen that appears like mirror writing. Okay, this is a talk from Newcastle Startup Week, Paul Lancaster's Newcastle Startup Week. And it's probably going to appear on day 5. And the talk is called Narrower. My name's Michael Owen, by the way, and I work as a brand strategist inside a company called Michael, spelled M-Y-C-H-A-E-L, Michael. And I run a clothing brand called Always Wear Red. And I write a daily blog called 50 Odd. This is a talk called Narrower. I wasn't going to do this talk actually, but I saw day 1 of Newcastle Startup Week and I was reminded about the generosity that Newcastle Startup Week is meant to be about. And I thought this talk I had on my head called Narrower, which is what this is. I thought this is useful. This is useful for people who are thinking of pivoting. Pivoting, nice word. For me, it just means, look, if what you're doing doesn't work, just do something else. So yeah, made up word, nice little made up word, pivoting. But I worry that when people pivot or change, they fundamentally think that to have to get more customers or to do better, they should perhaps broaden their offering and talk to more people. And from a brand perspective, that's exactly what not to do. So this is a talk called Narrower, and it'll probably go on for half an hour, but it's going to be based on a great number of brand principles that I've applied to people that I've worked with over the years. And the people I've worked with over the years include Virgin Money, Sage, Baltic, and the people in my team. When I had a brand consultancy, my first brand consultancy about 8 years ago, 10 years ago now maybe, they worked with any brand you can think of, the world's biggest brands, including Nike, Coca-Cola, etc. So I've been very lucky in that I've worked in and around some of the best brand builders around, and they've helped me to look to think about why running narrowly focused brands is potentially infinitely more profitable than more broadly focused brands. Okay, and by the way, what I mean by a narrowly focused brand is it basically has a very strong focus on the change it wants to make, and it has a very precise target audience, normally very narrow, and it does very few things. It does one thing well maybe, or it does 1 or 2 things really well, as opposed to a very broadly focused brand. You'll find exceptions, of course, but I'll talk about what is, I'll talk about the 80%ers actually. I'm comfortable saying that. Most of what I'll talk about is 80% of the people, 80% of the time, sometimes 100% of the time actually. Anyway, how far in are we? 2 or 3 minutes perhaps. This is a talk about, it's called Narrower, and it's why, if you're going to change, keep your focus narrow. So imagine that you are doing your house up, and like me, you think, oh, I wish I knew a good plumber. I really wish I knew a good plumber, or a good joiner, or a good sparky, you know, a really good electrician. Eventually someone's referred to you and it's a really good electrician. Oh, fantastic. And you meet the electrician and she or he says, hello, I'm the electrician you've been looking for. And you say, great, I need a really good electrician. And I've got this feeling of, I'm content because I've found the electrician I was looking for. And then the electrician, you say to them, whilst you're here, I need a joiner as well. Can you tell me about a really good joiner? And they say, she or he says, I'm a really good joiner as well. Now immediately I go, okay, I wish you hadn't said that actually, because I want you to be so obsessed about being an electrician that you're a really good electrician, and someone else is just a really great joiner. Now you're doing both of them I don't feel so comfortable, as comfortable. And then you go, oh, okay, what about a plumber? I need a plumber. And they say, or I'm probably getting these the wrong way around, but my point is, this person says, you know what, whether you need a plumber or a joiner or an electrician, I can do all three. And all of a sudden, I don't like them as much. And the reason is because they're suggesting to me that they are really good at these three things. And I think the more things that any one person or any one brand does, this is the principle that's at play here. It weakens their position in the one place that you want them to be exceptional. And in most markets, there's ever such a lot of competition. So I want people who are really good at one thing, who are very narrowly focused and who understand who they're for. And I suppose another example is, because our brains as consumers, they try and understand and picture and imagine what places are like, and what brands are like, and what people are like, and what offerings are like, and what businesses are like. So if I said to you, look, there's a new pub opening in town, first thing you'll say is, well, it doesn't matter because we're in lockdown, aren't we? But forget that for a second, okay? Because one of these days, we won't be in lockdown. Remember what this talks about? It's called narrower. It's about the fact that narrowly focused brands are infinitely more powerful and profitable and valuable, according to the balance sheet, than broadly focused ones. So this new bar in town, do you want to come to this new bar in town? My brain's going, bar, okay, it's probably got beer in it and some people in it and tables and chairs. And you say, well, what do you know about the bar, Michael? And I'll say, well, I just know that it's a bar. Now, it's kind of hard for you to make a decision. Just say, is it a bar? Yeah, you want to go, everyone wants to go to the pub at the moment. But anyway, this is my point. If I say it's basically up the top end of Newcastle and it's a student bar, all of a sudden, you can start to picture the clientele, picture the drinks that are probably served, picture when it's going to be busy, what time of the night. It's normally slightly later than non-student focused bars. It's probably open till 4 o'clock in the morning. And, bars that are generally for people of a different demographic and age are not. Some are, some aren't. But the point is, I'm making generalizations about how we come to understand what a brand is and who it's for. And to be quite frank, whether we want to get involved with the brand or not. So my point is, if it's explained to you that it's a student bar, then you can kind of picture it. But here's the rub. Here's the thing. Student bars aren't just for students, of course. So I can make a judgment as a 50-year-old guy whether I want to go. If I do, I do. And if I don't, I don't. So there's another force at play here, which is, and this is a truth, a narrow focus can actually mean a very broad appeal. A broad focus can actually mean no appeal, because if it's a bar and you don't understand what the bar is, well, how can that be appealing apart from you understand the category? It's a bar. But in a competitive category, do you want to go to this bar that you know very little about or who it's actually for? Or do you want to go to that one that you already know? You're more likely to choose that one you already know, unless you want to go and have a look at the new bar, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, this is a chat about narrowing the focus and broadening the appeal, actually, and as I say, increasing the value of the company and making more money as a brand. So there's a strange thing going on here, which is, I'll repeat it because it's true, that the narrower the focus, the broader the appeal. And a great example of that is, and I think it's North Face, but I'll stand corrected if it's not North Face. Great sentence about North Face. North Face is a brand for mountaineers whose customer base, target customer base, are commuters. Okay. Now, if North Face, and I think it's North Face, it might be Berghaus, I can't remember, but it doesn't matter for illustration purposes. Let's stick with North Face. So North Face are the brand for mountaineers because their customer base are commuters. Now you get that. I know your brain gets that. So the very narrow focus is, we are a brand for mountaineers, and you make certain assumptions and you draw certain conclusions about that as a commuter. Imagine if North Face said, hello, we are North Face, we are the brand for commuters. Would you like to buy one, Mr. or Mrs. Commuter? The answer is no, I wouldn't. If you're a brand for mountaineers, I'm infinitely more likely to want to buy one, because I want to be associated with that brand and not a clothing brand for commuters. So we're starting to explore a little bit about why a narrow focus is much better than broader focus. And remember why I'm doing this. It's day 5 of Newcastle Startup Week. And I'm encouraging you, if you are going to pivot or change or shift your focus in the new world that we've got, and by the way, be careful that you, at a brand level, you're sticking with the principles that are going to go through this lockdown, because this is temporary, largely temporary. We will revert back to virtually what we were before within 2 or 3 years. That's hugely likely if you look at exactly what happened with wars, with previous pandemics, and with previous, the deepest recessions. We're virtually back to where we were within 2 or 3 years. Now, this isn't an argument about that. I'm kind of lucky because I've got no one to argue with me, but I'm just putting it to you that whatever you're doing, short-term marketing strategies certainly should acknowledge the current situation, but your brand should endure through this, because all great brands understand that they're built over a long time. Back on the subject of narrowing your focus. I'm working with a number of businesses at the moment, a tech startup in the Northeast, a tech start again in Liverpool. It's basically a tech-focused company that's been going for 25 years that wants to reposition the brand, which is kind of tricky, but we're doing it. I'm working with a whiskey distillery, Northumberland's first whiskey distillery. That's a very big project. That's an 8-figure investment project. I'm working with a local castle, and I'm working with another global tech company, actually, that protects subsea and surface assets. The reason I'm telling you this is because all the brands I work with, I do encourage them to narrow their focus rather than have a broader focus. It's based on a do one thing well principle, and people have a greater understanding of you, the more narrowly focused you are, and if consumers have a greater understanding of you, the more likely to use you. Now, the reason I'm glancing down at my desk here is because I printed off a number of things from brand reviews and brand frameworks that I've written, just to remind me of little bits and bobs to talk to you about. This is a page from a thing that I wrote called A Brand. And basically A Brand is a 20-page, 22, 23-page digital book, which you can get if you go to angelfish.com. So that's Angelfish. I'll spell that for you. ANGELFYSH, angelfish.com. Sign up to the newsletter and it'll immediately send you a copy of this book. And all this book does is look at the A or B of a great number of fundamental decisions that you can make about brand, marketing, and design. And it just tells you whether A or B is the right thing to do. So it's a really efficient way to work out how your organization should be communicating. But the reason I mention it at this point is because one of them is basically saying, should I be narrowly focused or should I be broadly focused? This is, again, looking the wrong way around. It's confusing me. That's backwards, but it probably isn't when you're reading it. Anyway, choose a narrow focus. Don't be broadly focused, because the more broadly focused you are, it confuses people. And generally, if a specialist goes up against a generalist, the specialist wins, because they're considered to be pretty obsessive about this one thing that they do. Always Wear Red is the clothing brand that I have, and it's becoming increasingly narrowly focused, because all we do is hand knits, all we do is jumpers, cardigans, and scarves, and all we do is red and black. Now, if you like those things and you want something that there's a whole story behind why they're rather special on a world stage, you read those things. If you want it, no one does all of those things like we do globally, so you'll buy it. And if you don't, then you don't. But that's another thing about all great brands. They're not for everybody. They're for just a target audience. And just to repeat, the more narrowly focused the target audience is, the more special they'll feel, the easier it is to build a community around your brand, because the people you're selling to are similar people. They all want to see the same change. They all want to buy the same product, rather than a rather more complex offer. So, we're still on the subject of keeping your focus narrow. There are other reasons why, if you're watching this and working out what to do with your business, that keeping your focus narrow is important. It's because a lot of people, when they enter a category, when they're wondering what to do, particularly if you're a bit panicky at the moment, you can start to look at your competitors, or a better word than competitors is just other options in the market, other ways of getting the same benefits that you offer. And a great question to ask yourself when you start doing that is, who's best at being you? Who's best at being you? And the answer is always you. In the same way as if you asked Quentin Tarantino to create a film, you'd get a Quentin Tarantino film. And if you said, Mr. Tarantino, please, can you just do a film like this? He'd go, no. He wouldn't say no. It'd be, I wouldn't know. This is the way I do films. You'll get a Quentin Tarantino film. Tim Burton, the same. Speak to Noel Gallagher about doing a piece of music other than the kind of music that Noel Gallagher does. These are creative people, of course, but so are you. And if you think you're not, or it's not that you're not creators, it's just that you've forgot you're creative. But what's my point? This is about the narrowness of your focus. Focus on being you, because you're the best person at being you, and continue to build your business around that. Because when you get panicky, you can start to look at people who you think are doing okay during these tricky times, and you can end up just being a poor imitation of somebody around you. There are all sorts of principles on this kind of thing about sticking to your guns and being truly different. And another really weird quotation, but it's true, is it is better to be different than it is to be better. I'll say it again, it is better to be different than it is to be better. I've worked with a number of clients and I've experienced a number of brands that eventually they get this. So an example is Gateshead College, which I think is clearly the best college in the north of England. It's been the best performing college for 5 years on the run, and it's actually the best performing college in the whole of the United Kingdom. I don't know if it's this year or last year, but it either is or was. And it's a stunningly constructed brand and a stunningly well-led organisation, in my opinion, because when we have Newcastle College talking about great facilities, great nightlife, great accommodation, and all this very broadly focused number of things, none of which are ownable by that college, by the way. That's another story. The owning a brand, a unique brand position. Whilst all that's going on with Newcastle, I don't know what Newcastle College stand for, but I do know what Gateshead College stand for. They stand for jobs. That's it. Jobs. If you want a job, go to Gateshead College. And the reason why, historically, Gateshead College was built around giving jobs to a local factory. That's in, I can't remember the year now, actually. Can't remember. That's why they were set up. It was to supply a local manufacturing business. I can't remember who it was with jobs. So it's in their DNA anyway. Well, basically, all Judith and Nadine talk about is employment edge, and anything around employment edge. You're more likely to get a job if you go to Gateshead College than any other college, because they're geared up on that focus. That's a brand. It takes discipline and consistency to stay narrowly focused. There are some great examples on a global scale. So a Procter & Gamble brand is Duracell, as we know, and we know what Duracell is, and we know what Duracell does, and we know why we'd want to buy Duracell. We know Duracell's a battery, and we know that or we believe that it lasts longer than any other battery. So that's the reason to buy Duracell. But the point is, what else does Duracell do? And the answer is nothing, because Procter & Gamble know how to run narrowly focused brands. Duracell have dabbled in little bits and bobs over the years, torches and things, but they just do brands. They've got a 20-something% market share, which is the biggest market share in the world. It's a very fragmented marketplace, but so 20-odd% is enough for them. I think it's between 25 and 30. But the point is, this is a chat about narrowing your focus. When you're known for just doing one thing, you can become very powerful, because you can. There's an I just keep repeating this word. There's an obsessiveness, and the human brain prefers narrowly focused offers. And sometimes the brands get it right, and sometimes brands get it wrong. Dove, for example. Now I've said Dove, the toiletries product. I know that when I said Dove, most of you would be thinking, well, it's that toiletries brand. And also the vast majority would be thinking it's for women, because that's what they built their brand on. So Dove have quite recently, so in the last 3 years, 3 to 5 years, I think, have launched men's products. It just doesn't make sense. It's wrong because it's broadening the focus. Brand extension is the correct terminology, but that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it. I don't know who owns Dove actually, but I don't know. I don't know if it's Procter & Gamble or not, but if it is, they're going against their own principles. Extending a brand is possible into new areas. This isn't meant to fundamentally contradict everything I've said so far, but it's only if that new place you go to care about the things that matter where you currently are. And body confidence, which is largely what Dove is known for in the female marketplace, is a more resonant message than in the male marketplace. And, you know, men with women's toiletries, I want to hear that. That's a thing. A bit macho, a bit silly, but it's a thing. The area of marketing that I've just talked about there is market orientation, which is understanding what's actually going on in the marketplace. As a guy called Mark Ritson says, the most important thing for marketers to understand is that they're not the market. The market's the market. That's why with the brands I work with, the first thing I have to do is get them to almost forget everything about what they think is powerful about their brand, because they're not in the market. And oftentimes when you own a brand, you're the worst person to work out what to do because you're too close to the brand. Anyway, all this is about is giving you the confidence to stick to what you're good at. Because if you're thinking of changing, the temptation is to offer more things to more people, and it's exactly the wrong thing to do. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of fundamentals, just a little bits of advice, I suppose, to help you if you're thinking about accelerating what you're doing through these weird and wonderful times, or changing, pivoting, if you like. So I used to run lots of agencies for 14 or 15 years, actually. And even back then, you know, I ran a brand consultancy called Violet Bick. I ran a creative agency called One Best Way, a digital marketing agency called Angelfish, web support services company called Done and Dusted, and they were all run at the same time. And the reason is because people wanted different benefits from them. From the creative agency, people wanted effectiveness. They actually wanted to, you know, creative activity that could be measured. So I tried my very best to offer that. With web support services, people wanted simplicity. So I had to do it under a different brand. With digital marketing, it was a different approach because it was based on emerging, because it was around 2000 actually. Actually, it wasn't, it was later, but it was based on, it was still quite young. So Angelfish back in the day was actually just SEO when it started, just search engine optimization, done in a very precise way. And then Violet Bick at the time was the Northeast's only, and it is actually still, I don't think anyone's done this. It was the only specialist brand consultancy in the Northeast. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because clearly I could have done a full service agency, but I didn't, because it created 4 different doorways for people to come into. But the key is this: when they wanted web support services, for example, the customer craved simplicity. So most of our customers back then were Northeast based. So we said, bring your laptop in and we'll set your bloody email up for you. Well, how much will that cost? Well, nothing. You know, just bring it in and we'll do it. Okay. 10-minute job. So the point is they wanted simplicity. They didn't want to learn how to set up email addresses necessarily. So we just did it. But that's an entirely different thing than they wanted from the creative agency. They wanted to understand the relationship between spend and turnover increases and profitability. And that was different, of course, return on investment, if you like, in the area of business communications. So my point is I narrowed everything down. Narrowing down builds more powerful brands, because, you know, I guess an illustration that we might all be aware of is when Toyota wanted to develop a Toyota Posh, you know, a premium Toyota they wanted to create. So they created not a Toyota Posh, they created a Lexus. The way it works. New brands for new brand positions, for new customer bases, for new benefits. That's the way it works. Narrow your focus. If you guys are bored or panicky or somewhere in between because of what's going on at the moment, even though it sounds really weird, set up a new brand. Because to shift perceptions or to broaden the focus of an existing brand that means X in the mind of the consumer, if you want to make it mean XY, it'll end up meaning X minus one. And why the hell are they doing Y? So it'll weaken where you are. Very likely it'll weaken where you are, and they'll think, why the hell are they here? This is a complex subject, but basically the principle that I keep repeating is just keep your focus narrow. Just, you're the best person at being you. So continue to be you. Know the change you want to make in your market. Stick to your guns. And by the way, the Simon Sinek thing I'm talking about here is don't chase people that buy what you're selling. This is really weird, but it's true. Don't chase people that want to buy what you're selling. Chase people that believe what you believe. I'll say it again. Your job is not actually to sell in a purist sense. It's not to look for people who want to buy what you're selling. It's look for people who believe what you believe, people who believe in the change that you want to make. Okay. Virgin built a brand on this, even though they're struggling at the moment. But you know what? I mean, they're struggling at the moment because this is a strange thing about brand as well. They're struggling at the moment because they're a strong brand known for. They're the people's champion. That is actually what the DNA of their brand is. So when they do something a bit cheeky, it really stands out. And a great example of this is Newcastle United and Mr. Ashley furloughed everybody. And there was an uproar, but it was a little uproar that flared for a day or two. And then they went, that's what he does. He's a bit of a tosser. That's the way he behaves as a leader. We know what Ashley does. When Liverpool did it, who are actually known as a cuddlier, lovelier football club, the furore was far greater, even though they'd done the same thing. But strangely, a great brand can work, in inverted commas, against you, because that's not the behaviour we expect from Liverpool, actually. So Klopp got involved, and, well, we're told Klopp got involved, and they reversed the decision. This is all about brand, of course. That's the headline here. But the subject I'm talking about today is staying narrowly focused, okay? Narrower is what this talks about. So every brand I've built myself, stays very narrowly focused because that's where the power is. And I made a note to myself this morning of how to try and hammer this over to you. And I like another great example. It's about narrowness in terms of not just what the company stands for, but in their distribution channels. Just to talk very briefly about Thornton's, because Thornton's, when I was little, was the place that my mum would take me to, and it'd be like an Aladdin's cave of chocolate. It was just an amazing place. And I think, from memory, unless my little brain has manufactured this, it hasn't, because it did happen. It's the place where I'd want to go on a Saturday morning, I think. And it was very bright, and the doorway was massive. It wasn't, I was just very small. And I could also hear the click, click, click of the little cast aluminium hammers hitting the toffee. And it was special. And you could only get Thornton's stuff in Thornton's. So to go there, having in the week been to bloody Tesco or whatever, it was magical. Between 5 and 10 years ago, some clever clogs at Thornton's forgot what the Thornton's brand was about, which was it's the Willy Wonka come to life on the high street. And they got a distribution deal with Tesco, actually. And of course, it's going to cause a massive spike in the short term with sales. Then, within 2 or 3 years, and you know where this is going, profit warnings at Thornton's, because it's a fucking stupid thing to do, because that's not what the brand is for. If you can make chocolate and you've got a brand called Thornton's and it's magical and that's where the power is, you keep it in that niche, in that offering. If you're making chocolate and you want to go into the mass market, do it under a different brand. Because when we go into Thornton's and there's a bar of chocolate for, I'll just make some prices up, £2, and it's next to a similarly packaged Tesco's Best thing and it's black and it looks kind of the same, and that's 90 pence. You're going to buy the, a percentage of the time you're going to buy the Tesco one, and it just takes the magic away. But the thing is, the rules don't change. It's just the behaviors of the brands and the marketers change. Silly marketers and people who don't understand brand. So someone who does understand brand, a brand that's a super brand, that basically took the Thornton's position, is Hotel Chocolat, because Hotel Chocolat is today what Thornton's was 20 or 30 years ago. It's not complex. It's just when you stay narrowly focused, you're more powerful. We're not going to get over all the nuances of this subject in half an hour or 45 minutes. It's just some of the principles. And all I'm encouraging you to do is stick to your guns and be you and focus down on being you. I'm going to close now. I'm going to tell one more little story which should illustrate how being narrowly focused can have a broad appeal. And then I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to look after your brand, not just in these weird times, but any time. So the last thing I'll talk to you about on the subject of a narrow focus is the way that Pepsi nearly caught Coke, because they did nearly catch Coke. I think they got within single-figure percentages of Coke in the 80s, and this is the way they did it. And when I tell you this, it'll be familiar to many of you, but it's a strange thing. But please do at least try to absorb some of the principles that are at play here. So Coca-Cola, the global #1, stands for the people's champion. No, it doesn't. That's Virgin. It stands for the real thing, because it was the first of its kind. Okay. So Pepsi come along, and they're the #2, and most markets, by the way, that are globally significant have a battle between a 1 and a 2, which take up the vast majority of the market share. Then the others are kind of also rounds, and sometimes they swap, but it's largely the top 2 that fight it out. Anyway, Coca-Cola, the real thing. Pepsi, in the 80s, this is classic, to try and catch the #1. I remember the subject's meant to be narrowness, but this is another principle of brand. To try and catch the #1, if you're the #2, generally you should do the opposite of them, which is ridiculous from a common sense point of view, but it's absolutely bang on from a brand sense point of view. I'm not going to go into that now, but this is what they did. They basically, as you perhaps remember, they said, hello, we're Pepsi, we're the drink for the new generation. And they got that there, Mr. Michael Jackson, to be part of the brand, of Madonna. And in a nutshell, it was classic repositioning of the competition, because what they said was Coca-Cola's for old people. Not directly. They basically said, we're the drink for the new generation. But this is the point about narrowness. The new profile of drinker for Pepsi was younger people, and people like me, who are older people outside of the core demographic, target demographic, who still imagine that they're younger, or perhaps who want to be perceived as being younger, and who don't want to be perceived as drinking the older option of cola. I get that. I get how that works. But please remember what's at play here. Hello, we're Pepsi with the drink for the new generation. That's not just going to appeal to the new generation. It's going to appeal to the older generation who want to be perceived as being part of the new generation. That's the way aspirational brands work. It's a little bit chess-like. It's just 1 or 2 moves ahead. But all you need to do is think about the power of remaining narrowly focused. You will, on some level, create an aspirational brand by doing that. Remember the Pepsi and Coke thing. I printed off a couple of pages from brand reviews and brand frameworks that I've worked on with people. Yeah, I mean, I'll just mention this just because on the subject of narrow focus. Lynx. Okay, so Lynx is a brand built on seduction. brands stand for one thing generally. Okay, so Lynx is a brand that stands for seduction. Not so long ago, that they're doing adverts in a white can about it's about not sweating so much. And I look at that and I think that's a Sure advert. Why are Lynx doing a Sure advert? They're not. They're doing a Lynx advert, but they're actually what my brain is saying, and what most consumers' brains said as a result of that, and that's why they stopped. It was, Lynx, you stand for seduction. Boys getting girls, girls getting boys, boys getting boys, girls getting girls. It's nothing to do with perspiration. That's the Sure position. That's the way it works. And the other thing I've noted down when I was chatting to someone is, you know, if you're old enough, you remember this, but there was a time, I think back in the 80s, where Boots started doing computers. Boots actually stands for personal care. So as a personal care brand, you don't do computers. You know, you don't broaden outside of what your brand stands for. This is just the way narrowly focused brands work. The behaviors become kind of expected to be a certain way by the market. Okay, so I'm just reinforcing again and again with brands that you might know about why a narrow focus and speaking to less people about less things helps you to sell more stuff and make more profits ultimately. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. And it takes discipline and consistency to do that. And if you need this kind of stuff reinforcing, as I say, go to angelfish.com and download this A brand thing. It's free, and just have a read. If you want to chat with me, just give me a ring and I'll try and help you with your own precise personal situation. You know, working out what your brand actually stands for and then sticking to your guns and running it consistently. And that brings me to a couple of little tips I'll just leave you with. The new thing that I've launched is called Michael, mychael.co.uk. And basically, it's the new me. And I say that because this is a chat about narrowing your focus, because I've done a number of things in business communications over the years, and I'm probably 8.5 out of 10 at most things: design, marketing, brand, etc. But the thing which I think I've fallen in love with, and I'm kind of obsessive about in the context of business and brand communications, is helping people to find and tell their story without sounding too weird. Finding your story's brand, telling your story's marketing, I suppose. But that's really what I've narrowed right down to. So I've gone narrower and narrower and narrower. And when people, I just want you to know this. When people chatted to me about business communications 20 years ago, because I've been in this game for 20 odd years now, they'd go, hello, Mike, let's have a talk about business communications or brand communications or design or marketing or strategy or tactics or brand. Nowadays, people go, let's have a chat about brand, on the assumption that brand comes before marketing, and it's that thing that saves you shed loads of money in the longer term, because it's actually what you stand for, what you're for, the difference you want to make before you spend a penny on marketing, because most businesses try and outspend each other. So I'm becoming increasingly well known as this guy who waffles on about brand, because that's my passion, and I can help people to build narrowly focused brands based on a number of rules. And the rules, by the way, I've just written down 3 of the rules here. One of them is knowing what business you're really in, because people don't buy what you do, they buy what you do does. So don't talk about what you do, talk about what you do does. I'll say that again. It's about, an example I can give you is Always Wear Red, I suppose. What Always Wear Red does is it's knitwear. It's, in my opinion, and my trials and tribulations over the last 3 years has been to do the best knitwear hand knits in the world. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's how they make you feel is what the brand's actually for. It's to encourage you when you've got these big cuddly sweaters on just to do nothing. So that's what the brand's for. It's your permission to pause. But what we do is hand knits. And I talk about both because I know what we do and I know what we're for. When you talk about your brand, most of you talk about what you do, but you don't know what you're for. That means you're actually not a brand at all. because brands are always for something, and it has to be something unique and ownable. Or else you'll just sound like the category. You know, there's lots of people doing similar things to you anyway, but what is it that you are famous for? And by the way, this brings us all the way back to narrowing your focus, because if you try and be famous for lots of things, you will fail and you'll be known for nothing. So keep focused. Anyway, 3 things to remember about brand building. Number 1, know what business you're really in. What that means is it's not just about what you do, it's about what you're for. Focus on what you're for, the change you want to make, and then people will rally around that change, rather than just, do you want to buy a jumper, or do you want to buy some beer, or do you want to buy, I don't know, this cup. What's the change you're trying to make? What are you trying to, you know, are you trying to stop me buying disposable cups and actually have, okay, I understand that now. Just don't try and explain to me why you're trying to sell me this thing, so I understand it, so I can tell other people in the same way that you told me. That's the way that word of mouth works. You know, if someone goes, oh, I've got great word of mouth with my business, say, what are they saying about you? And invariably they go, don't know. Well, why are you showing off about the fact you've got great, a whole load of people talking about your brand? What are they actually saying? Don't know. What's the point? Great brands engineer what markets say about them. And the more narrowly focused and simple and consistent it is, the easier it is. The easier it is to be successful in the medium and longer term. I've written down owning a life-enhancing benefit in the mind of the consumer. Owning a life-enhancing benefit in the mind of the consumer. And that's particularly topical at the moment, because the richest man in the United Kingdom is a gentleman called James Dyson. Between 10 and 15 years ago, James Dyson said, we're going to create this carpet cleaner thingy with no loss of suction. Okay. And the life enhancing benefit is, you know, you don't have to change that bloody bag thing in your Hoover. And there's no loss of suction. So the more full the bag becomes, we understand that annoys you out there. So I'm going to solve that problem. Okay, cool. He's now worth, I think, 16 billion. I may have the number wrong, but it's a few quid. So 3 things to remember about your brand. Okay, the first one, know what business you're really in. It's not what you do, it's what you're for. Focus on what you're for. Secondly, own a life enhancing benefit in the mind of the consumer. What is the one thing that only you stand for? Because if I said, or if you said this thingy that cleans the floor with no loss of suction, you know it's a Dyson before you've even heard the word Dyson. They own that position. So if someone else comes in and goes, we've got a really suctiony floor cleaner, the market goes, and this is amazing, the market goes, oh, a bit like a Dyson. Then they buy a Dyson. So if you try and compete with the category leader at their own game, all you'll do is reinforce their preeminence. That's it. Third and final, focus, clarity, and consistency. That's what I wrote in that document. Focus, clarity, and consistency, okay? The thing that annoys a lot of creatives that I work with is that clarity trumps creativity. I shouldn't use the word trump, should I? Because he's an idiot. Clarity is more important than creativity. And a lot of designers are not creatives, they're stylists. And what I mean by that is they can make things look pretty, but they don't know why, therefore it has no value. What do I mean by that? It's better to be clear than it is to be pointlessly pretty, you know? So without going into that too much, just keep your designy bits clear. Number 1, know what business you're really in. Number 2, own a life-enhancing benefit in the mind of the consumer. Number 3, focus, clarity, consistency. Keep saying the same thing over and over again about your brand. The very first flipping advert about Dyson, it was, there's no loss of suction. He still talks about it now. Not in a direct way, in a kind of roundabout way, but that's still the main message. Anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so, no. I would love you to get to the point where Quentin Tarantino is, actually, where basically, and the last thing I'll talk to you about actually is based on narrow focus, and it takes a lot of bravery. And I've run 10 businesses now in my life. Some I've sold, some I've merged, some I've closed. And the one business that accelerated faster than any other was because of one reason, which I'm going to tell you in just a moment, okay? And it's linked to the best person to make a Quentin Tarantino film is Quentin Tarantino. And the best person to create an Oasis type song is Noel Gallagher, that kind of shenanigans. These people, you just kind of know what to expect. And you either like it or you don't, but that's the point of branding. And the most important piece of three-word advice that I'd give to me or you or anyone on the subject of brand building is this: get an opinion. That's it. Just get an opinion. Because loads of businesses just fanny about going, ooh, should you do this? Should you do that? What is it I should be saying to make you most likely to buy from me? There's nothing that a mamby-pamby, wishy-washy offer can say to me that's going to make me love you in the long term. I might buy from you today because you've got a sale on or you're competing on price or something. You can say that if you want, but I don't care about you. Get an opinion. It's my opinion that business is boring. That's my opinion. And it's actually based on a statistic. And the statistic is 90% of business communications in the UK is neither noticed nor remembered. And the spend is close to 30 billion quid. And I think that's ridiculous. And the people who are at fault are marketers, generally. And owner managers, like me and you. Because we don't have an opinion, we just blend in. 90% of all business communications is neither noticed nor remembered. Of the 10% that is noticed and remembered, 6% of that 10%, people don't even like it. It's better than not being noticed at all, of course, because even though I don't like Go Compare, for example, I know of its existence, which leaves us with 4%. My belief, this is Michael Owen talking now, that if you want to do well in business, it's better to be different than it is to be better, because then you're noticed. And if you're noticed, then you can start the dialogue. So my job is to help people to set a distinctive tone and to get attention and build from there. So I want to be in the 4%, not the 96% of rubbish that people don't even notice. And it's ridiculous. But it leads back to quite a pointed belief, which is that business is boring. Most business is utterly boring. That's why sometimes, with a smile on my face, when clients say to me, why is it that people aren't that interested in what I'm doing? And I'll go, it's because you're not interesting. I'm not being rude, but what I really mean is you're not communicating yourself in an interesting way. There's a lot that's interesting about most of you, but communicating it in an interesting way within an appropriate strategy based on a great brand, a single-minded brand, is very rare. Okay, stick to your guns, build a brand, then market, then do all the designy stuff at the end. Don't start at the designy Ponzi, I like this color and this type. That's at the end, okay? Work out the change you want to make. That's your brand. Work out what you're for. That's your brand. Then communicate that with the most appropriate strategy and tactics. And then, or at least plan for that, and then do the fluffy stuff at the end. But keep your focus narrow. That's what this is about. It takes bravery, you know what I mean, to just stick to your guns. But it's honestly the best way. Stay narrow.